It's hard to believe that it's only been a year since Rabbi Benji Forster came to this community. In that year, he has had a significant impact on our community, most certainly with youth and young adults. I'm not just saying this because his father is in my line of vision. It's our honor this morning to hear from Rabbi Benji Forster.
Shana Tova. In the days following October 7th, the Israeli flag was projected throughout the world onto famous landmarks and monuments, a powerful statement of empathy and solidarity from the global community. This included 10 Downing Street in the UK, the Opera House in Sydney, the Eiffel Tower in Paris, and here in the United States on our White House. Breathtakingly, Berlin's famous Brandenburg Gate, which had been adorned with Nazi swastikas just 80 years earlier, stood bedecked in blue and white. And yet, there was one other landmark adorned with the Israeli flag that was possibly even more breathtaking than Berlin. On October 10th, the Arch of Titus in Rome, just steps from the Colosseum, stood illuminated with the Star of David at its head. The Arch of Titus was erected just years after Rome destroyed the Second Temple in Jerusalem in the year 70 of the Common Era. On the arch, we see the triumphant procession of the Roman legion returning home with the plunder they stole from our holy temple. Most famously, the pilfered menorah is proudly paraded above the shoulders of the togaed Roman men. The arch stands today as testimony to the Jewish people's thousands-year legacy of pain and persecution. But the Israeli flag on that very monument is testimony to the fact that for all that time, lo avda tikvatenu, we never lost hope. A hope that is truly bat shnot alpayim, 2,000 years old, dating back to that very arch. In fact, when the UN announced its partition plan in 1947 to grant the Jewish people their own state for the first time in millennia, the Jews of Rome gathered at the Arch of Titus to celebrate. While the menorah is the most obvious and well-known artifact depicted on Titus's arch, there is a different item imprinted in the stone that I want to call our attention to this Rosh Hashanah. Something that had escaped my gaze for all of these years, including when I saw the arch up close with my own two eyes. Protruding out in a crisscross like a big X are two long horns, two ancient trumpets. Since it's Rosh Hashanah, let me say from the outset, the horns on the arch are not shofarot, but they are the shofar's close cousins, the chatzotzrot, the two silver trumpets that played a prominent role in our people's history, but whose meaning and very existence have fallen largely into obscurity. So today, I want to rescue those trumpets from obscurity, to mine and center their story for its own meaning and wisdom as we transition from 5784 to 5785. We first learn of the trumpets during the Israelites' desert sojourn, back when they still stood at Mount Sinai. After receiving the 10 Commandments, we sometimes forget that the Israelites spent almost a year stationed at the mountain. Finally, just before they departed, they received one final commandment. God spoke to Moses, saying, "Have 2 chatzotzrot, 2 silver trumpets made. With them you shall summon the congregation and set the division of camps in motion." God goes on to describe the trumpet blasts, long tekiah notes and short teruah ones, just like the shofar sounds we've heard today, each signaling instructions either for assembly or for movement. As they were set to embark upon their journey from Sinai, these sounds helped cue the Israelites when to pack up their tents and when to drive the pegs back into the ground. The trumpets were like ancient traffic signals, swapping out green and red lights for long and short stop and go sounds. So one would think that the trumpet's functionality would therefore expire upon their arrival to the land of Israel. Once they set up permanent houses and cities, they'd no longer need to know when to pack up and move. But in fact, God's instruction continued, announcing that the trumpet shall be chukat olam lidorotechem, an institution for all time, from generation to generation. How so? What will that look like? What will the trumpets be used for once the people of Israel are settled in the land of Israel? So God explains. When you are at war, you shall sound short teruah blasts on your trumpets, and on your joyous occasions, you shall sound the trumpets in a long tekiah note. The sounds that once signaled starting and stopping, the long tekiah and the truncated teruah, now shift into the sound of battle and the sound of celebration. The pure, whole sound of the tekiah projects might and stability, so it was used to mark moments of triumph and the celebration of the festivals. The broken teruah sound is understood by the rabbis and viscerally experienced as a wailing cry. So the teruah blast, with its punctures of vulnerability and angst, alerted the Israelites that they must brace for war. When I lived in Jerusalem, both during my semester abroad and during my year of rabbinical school, I learned that Jerusalemites have attuned their ears to 2 types of modern-day trumpets in the form of sirens. Each Friday night, as the sun begins to set over the sweeping hills and the Jerusalem stone skyline, an alarm sounds to signal the coming of Shabbat. This blast demarcates the rhythm of Jewish life that flows through Jewish time. While its sound is shrill, it fills the air with the atmosphere of Shabbat. Tekiah, on your joyous occasions, you shall sound the trumpet. Unfortunately, Israel's denizens know a different type of alarm. A siren that pierces the air and warns that danger lurks in the skies above. Tseva Adom, the red alert system, notifies residents that a rocket may strike within mere moments and that they must seek shelter. Teruah, when you are at war, you must also sound the trumpet. The specific shift, but the meaning endures. The tikiyah of festivity and the truah of vulnerability, sounding lidorotechem, from generation to generation. In his famous essay, Kol Dodi Dofek, Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, a leading luminary of the 20th century, offers a compelling reading of these two types of identities that emerge from these two types of trumpet blasts. Soloveitchik notices that God's commandment to craft the trumpet calls the Israelites by two different names. Machaneh, camp, and Edah, congregation. Ulmasa et machanot v'hayu lecha lemikra ha'edah. The trumpets shall serve you to summon the congregation, Edah, and to set the division of camps, machaneh, in motion. Camp and congregation. To Soloveitchik, these are two different paradigms of Jewish identity. Two different ways that our story gets shaped and shared. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, whom the Council General quoted so beautifully earlier, the late great chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, helps explain Soloveitchik's idea and clarify the difference between the camp identity on the one hand and the congregation identity on the other. He says, a camp is brought into being by what happens to it from the outside. It's what happens when we face a common enemy. We band together for mutual protection like animals that come together in herds to defend themselves against predators. So too do we come together as a camp. A defensive formation of collective care and responsibility. This identity responds to the Truah blast when Israel is summoned into conflict. Alternatively, a congregation is when people join together because they share a vision, an aspiration, a set of ideals. A congregation is a creative formation. People joining together to build a community around a shared mission. This identity responds to the tikiyah blast that heralds Jewish joy and celebration. The former is reactive, the latter proactive. The first is a response to what has happened to the group in the past. The second represents what the group seeks to achieve into the future. And here's the thing. They live side by side in the same verse, utilizing the same ritual. We are not one or the other. We flit back and forth. Congregation, camp, congregation, tikiyah, truah, whole, then broken, and then hopefully whole once more. And just as the trumpet blasts show up, recognizable but new, in each moment of Jewish history, so too do we see these two models of camp and congregation, an identity based in reactivity and one formed in creativity, in our experience of this past year. On the one hand, this has been a year of violence and vitriol coming from the outside that has shaped the Jewish experience, that has forced us into our defensive camp formation. In Israel, walls breached and broken, and unthinkable amounts of lives ended and upended. In America and elsewhere, the disintegration of friendships and coalitions, a 360% increase in anti-Semitic incidents, and hateful speech permeating our places of study and of commute. The trumpet sound of Truah has been ringing in our ears since October 7th, alerting us to an entrenched feeling of insecurity. And so, in the face of that, we come together. We have gathered here, in this room, for speakers, for hard conversations, for classes, and for vigils. We have been a wide and resilient machaneh, a camp made up of diverse opinions, but united in our aching souls, yearning for peace. Our sanctuary has been a true sanctuary in a dark and hostile world. We have needed this refuge, and we have needed each other. We have depended on the comfort and familiarity of our camp. And yet, while 10-7 has created new interests and identification with Jewish community, Judaism cannot thrive when it is only grounded in the imperative to survive. Our Jewish experience cannot be shaped solely by responding to external threats. It must also be built up through our shared vision for the future. In other words, we may survive as a camp, but we thrive most fully as a congregation when we celebrate together and when we dream together. So while we held each other's heavy hearts through this past year, our community also spent this past year celebrating. Yes, mightily celebrating. Tikiyah, Tikiyah. There were so many joyous occasions this year. Weddings, new friendships, professional successes, growing families, babies named right here on our bima, much needed pauses taken, souls nourished and refreshed. And we celebrated as a community 150 years of Anshe Emet history. An exercise not just of looking back, but also of planting the seeds for our next 150. They are the seeds of creativity and imagination, and they will be watered with joy and with celebration. Tears, joy, camp, congregation, Truah, Tikiyah, it's all there. It's all here. One leading right into the other, and then back again, and back once more. This year, in the face of tragedy, the Jewish people has unlocked new reserves of resilience and a new determination to claim and celebrate our Jewishness. The historian Jonathan Sarna, whom we had the privilege of hosting here in honor of our 150th, he noted a surge in Jewish interest and involvement that pulsed through Hillel programs, lifted Jewish summer camp enrollment, and filled synagogue sanctuaries and social halls across the country and across the world. I imagine many of you have had to respond or have had a family member or someone you love respond to the challenges of our time with newfound Jewish inspiration. Perhaps unsavory posters hung up around your neighborhood made you want to wear a Jewish star necklace, a public symbol of identity and pride. Perhaps hearing about mezuzot getting ripped down in dormitories made you want to hang one up in your house. Or perhaps you were inclined towards other Jewish practices, lighting candles on Shabbat, giving mishloach manot on Purim, or offering tzedakah to causes meaningful to you and your family. Perhaps the hum of hate speech made you want to come to shul and to fill your ears and your hearts with the sound of prayer and the greetings of Shabbat Shalom and how are you holding up? So while many Jews have been brought together in response to tragedy, we also have right at the same moment a generational opportunity to harness this potential and to build a resilient and proud and vibrant Jewish future. The Teruah blast alerting our camp to harm may have brought many of us together this year, but the Tekiah blast, emanating from deep and intentional community, will keep us together for many years to come. The blue and white lights projected onto the Eiffel Tower and the White House and the Arch of Titus have long since extinguished. But we are still here. We are still together. The Teruah blast alerting our camp to harm may have brought us together, but the Tekiah will keep us going. As the psalmist says, Hazorim bedima berina yiktsoru. While we sow in tears, we shall yet reap with songs of joy. I hope that you'll continue to join us here, to dream with us, and to help us co-author the next chapter of the ever-unfolding Jewish story. Today, as we blow the shofar, let us hear the echoes of the chatzotzrot, those silver trumpets, allowing them to endure as God intended, lidorotechem, from generation to generation. B'chatzotzrot v'kol shofar hariu lifnei hamelech Adonai. With trumpets and with the shofar, you shall raise a shout before Adonai, your sovereign. From this Rosh Hashanah until the next, and onward from there, 150 years out and beyond. Wishing you and your families a Shana Tova.